Hi guys. So I'm sick, but the fun part about it is technology rocks, and we're gonna do this whole thing digitally. The end of the marking period is next week, and we've got to finish Great Expectations. So we're gonna pick up where we left off. We're gonna do this in little segments. I'm gonna do the thing where I real quickly summarize pages and we jump around. But the goal is to finish the book this week. I'm not entirely sure when I'll be back. I really don't know. I'm going to talk to the school later today, but I wanted to do this because I definitely will not be here today, which for you is Tuesday, even though I'm doing this on Monday. Okay, so we're going to do 25, 26, and 27 right now. When we left off on Friday, we were talking about how Wemmick had told Pip, you really need to watch Mr. Jagger's maid, his housekeeper, because she's just something to see. So before Pip gets to Mr. Jagger's house, he decides to go visit Wemmick. Now, I don't know if you guys watched this today, which was yesterday for you, Monday, on the movie, but Wemmick is super eccentric. When he's working for Jaggers, he's very stiff. He's very to the point. He's very dry. But his home life is a whole different ballgame. In chapter 25, Pip goes to Wemmick's house. And Wemmick lives in this crazy, brightly colored house. He's got a moat around his house. It's not even that big. He's got a moat around this house with a drawbridge. His dad lives with him, and Wemmick's older anyway, so he calls his dad the aged parent, old parent. And so the aged is hard of hearing and probably has a little bit of dementia. And so the whole time that Pip is there, the aged is just like nodding his head, and he's really excited just because he's old and he gets excitement out of seeing people. He can't hear anything, but he nods his head and is excited. And Wemmick's whole house looks like a castle. He calls it his castle. There are actually cannons and a place to run the flag up. He's just crazy eccentric. And he shoots the cannon off every night at a certain time because his dad is hard of hearing. He can only feel. So when the cannon goes off, he can feel the concussive force of the cannon going off, and he loves it. He thinks it's great fun. So every day, Wemmick shoots this cannon off at his house just to make his dad happy. It's really, really this whole different person than the Wemmick that works for Jaggers. So if you jump to page 113 in your book, there is this point where Pip's trying to reconcile the Wemmick that he's seeing here with all the brightly colored stuff and the aged parent and the cannons with the Wemmick that is working at Jagger's office, who is this dry, boring as all get out guy. So halfway down the page on 113, Pip asks Wemmick if Wemmick built all of this. Did you build all of this? Did you do all of this? And so Pip says, is it your own, Wemmick? And Wemmick's like, yeah. Oh, yeah, it's my own. And Pip goes, oh, is it indeed? Well, I hope Mr. Jaggers admires it. I hope Jaggers thinks it's as cool as I think it is. And Wemmick gets super, super serious. And he goes, never seen it, never heard of it, never seen the aged, never heard of him. No, the office is one thing and private life is another. When I go to the office, I leave the castle behind me. And when I come into the castle, I leave the office behind me. If it's not in any way disagreeable to you, you oblige me by doing the same. I don't wish it to be professionally spoken about. So he's got this secret private life that's fun and crazy and colorful and where he can relax, but he refuses to bridge the two. If he's at home, he's not thinking about the office. If he's at the office, he's not thinking about home. And he's almost has a split personality thing. And so it's really, really kind of interesting to see Wemmick like this. And Jaggers has no idea that Wemmick is this fun-loving guy with his dad that he shoots a cannon off for every day. So, okay. Chapter 26 then is when Pip goes to Jaggers' house and has dinner. So this is the, hey, Wemex says, hey, when you go, you really should check out the housekeeper. So let's go to page 114. And we're going to start 2 paragraphs into chapter 26. So page 114, chapter 26, 2 paragraphs in. Pip and Jaggers had been walking down the street, and Jaggers was like, hey, let's go to my house and have dinner. And Pip invited his friends, so they all end up there. As Jaggers had scarcely seen my 3 companions until now, for he and I had walked together, he stood on the hearth rug after ringing the bell and took a searching look at them. To my surprise, she seemed at once to be principally, if not solely, interested in Drummle. Now remember, Drummel's the jerk face. He is the arrogant, I'm better than anybody, like, complete jerk face, okay? Pip, he said, putting his large hand on my shoulder and moving me to the window, I don't know one from the other, but who's the spider? The spider? Said I. Yeah, the blotchy, sprawly, sulky fellow. Well, that's Bentley Drummle, I replied. The one with the delicate face is Startop. Not making the least account of the one with the delicate face, he returned, Bentley Drummle is his name, is it? I like the look of that fellow. He immediately began to talk to Drummle. I was looking at the other 2, and there came between me and them, the housekeeper, with the first dish for the table. She was a woman of about 40, I suppose, but I might have thought her younger than she was. Rather tall, of a lithe, nimble figure, extremely pale, with large faded eyes and a quantity of streaming hair. She set the dish on, touched my guardian quietly on the arm with a finger to notify that dinner was ready, and then vanished. Induced to take particular note of the housekeeper, both by her own striking appearance and by Wemmick's preparation, I observed that whenever she was in the room, she kept her eyes attentively on my guardian. I fancied that I could detect in his manner a consciousness of this, and perhaps of always holding her in suspense. Dinner went off gaily, and although my guardian seemed to follow rather than originate subjects, I knew that he wrenched the weakest part of our dispositions out of us. It was not then, but when we got to the cheese, that our conversation turned upon our rowing feats. One of their ways of exercising was to row boats up and down the river. Now we have rowing machines. Well, this was like before rowing machines. This is the actual rowing. So they would row up and down the river, and they start talking about who's the best rower. Our conversation turned upon our rowing feats, and that Drummle was rallied for coming up behind at night in the slow amphibious way of his. Drummle, upon this, informed our host that he much preferred our room to our company, and as to skill he was more than our master, and as to strength he could scatter us like chaff. But some invisible agency, my guardian wound him up to a pitch little short of ferocity about this trifle, and he fell into barring and spanning his arms to show how muscular he was, and we all fell into barring and spanning our arms in this ridiculous manner. Now the housekeeper was at that time clearing the table, and my guardian, taking no heed of her, but with the side of his face turned from her, was leaning back in his chair, biting the side of his forefinger and showing an interest in Drummle that, to me, was quite inexplicable. Suddenly, he clasped his large hand on the housekeeper's, like a trap, as she stretched it across the table. If you talk of strength, said Mr. Jaggers, I'll show you a wrist. Molly, let them see your wrist. Her entrapped hand was on the table, but she had already put her other hand behind her waist. Master, she said in a low voice, don't. I'll show you a wrist, repeated Jaggers, with an immovable determination to show it. Molly, let them see your wrist. Master, she said again, please. Molly, said Mr. Jaggers, let them see both of your wrists. Show them. Come. He took his hand from hers and turned the wrist upon the table. She brought out her other hand from behind her and held the two side by side. The last wrist was much disfigured, deeply scarred and scarred across and across. When she held her hands out, she took her eyes from Jaggers and turned them watchfully on every one of us in succession. There's a power here, said Jaggers, coolly tracing out the sinews with his fingers. Very few men have the power of wrist that this woman has. It's remarkable what mere force of grip there is in these hands. I have had occasion to notice many hands, but I never saw stronger in that respect, man's or woman's, than these. That'll do, Molly, said Mr. Jaggers, giving her a slight nod. You've been admired and can go. She withdrew her hands and went out of the room. So Molly shows her wrists, and she doesn't want to because she's just doesn't want to. And on her wrists are these cuts, these just deep, deep, deep trench cuts. And the first thing we think in, the 21st century is, oh, she's a cutter. She's not a cutter, okay? This girl is not a cutter. Something happened to her that caused her wrists to be like this. And Jaggers is very proud of that and very protective. It's this weird relationship that they have, but and not romantic in any sense. Just this weird. Anyway, she's got these really deep cuts, and it's just odd. And it's one more thing for Pip to put in his file of weird housekeeper Molly that Wemmick had kind of encouraged him to do. All right, you know what? We're going to stop here just for the second because whoever is teaching this class will now click the button and do chapter 27. But I'm going to pause, and I will be with you in a few seconds, and we'll do chapter 27. Okay, go Beans!